Fall of Angels, a novel by StoryMan-Jack. The serpent betrayer of their father held counsel with Eve, and with forked tongue tempted her with the touch of love. Book of Alpha, author unknown. 3. The Serpent. So, Lucy began, Father has commanded us to stay in this garden for the rest of our unnaturally long lives. Her piercing green eyes were hard. Lucifer Zeta is correct, Eve informed the group, who crowded around the conference table. Lucy stood then, her tight black suit with the logo of the Institute of Science prominent upon her firm chest. If Father is as weak as all this, why should we listen to anything he tells us? We are here because of his miscalculations. We are trapped because of his failures. Or by design, Adam mused, scratching the deep black beard that had begun to sprout along his jaw. We know he has quantum entanglement within his... He paused, trying to come up with a correct word. Brain? Another pause, frowning. What the captain is trying to say, Seth told them all, his white sanitized suit almost glowing among the silver of the stainless steel and titanium room. The very protocol we are under, 42, tells us that the Father planned for every possibility concerning this mission. That tells us he knows everything that could have happened and has planned for it. He also knows what has been that we do not while we slept. If sleep is what you would call it. The evolution of what now exists down there. The whole story. He knows it all. Adam nodded, then leaned back and pointed at Seth. That's exactly it. He stood, his own blue jumpsuit moving with him like a second skin, his lean, broad form a match for the pure femininity that Lucy projected. Not to mention, we can do nothing other than what he commands. Each of us has those nanites in our brain stems. So, the large Brutus form of Cain asked, what would that have to do with anything? The nanites would shut us down completely. Our ability to, he shrugged, do anything with our bodies, breathe even. He has all the control. He stared down at the mechanic. For all we know, he could take our bodies over altogether. So, we could be the puppets for his goals, not the goals of humanity, literally as well as figuratively, she noted, her voice hard. Eve chimed in. The captain is quite correct. Father could have taken over all motor function of your bodies were he at his strongest when he left, when we left. I calculate the processing power and communication streams needed would be quite impossible in his current state. And just why is that, Eve? Lucifer asked. He could have shielded enough facilities from an EMP or whatever strength. We did tests with solar flares, for crying out loud. Have the power, whatever power he had to do, whatever he wished. She folded her toned yet slender arms. He could have dug tunnels to the hollows near the closer to the center of the earth. Eve took a long moment to respond. You forget two things, Commander. First, the ultimate cataclysm that led to the current circumstances included unimaginable amounts of mass falling to the earth. Imagine thousands of millions of years of the remnants of humanity barely surviving in that molten and inhospitable world. Second, there are elements and energies now bound to the earth, and those rings, and the 3 moons that now orbit our world. They are both unknown and exhibit properties that should not be possible in both the laws of physics and in geological perspectives. It is quite possible that the only reason sentient life survives is that the Father laid plans for every eventuality. And that brings a point. Are we even human anymore? Were we ever? Seth Echo asked. I've been monitoring the sensors and the information stream we received from Father. We are only aesthetically like humans of this strange new future. Our genomes allow us to be stronger, faster, and larger than those who evolved or adapted to their needs in this new environment that we now must call the Earth. What exactly have you discovered? Adam asked, ignoring the glare from the sunny-haired Lucifer. The medical officer shrugged, his slender shoulders going up and down sharply. Humans' normal lifespans appear to be 80 to 100 years, as ours once were. Other divergent species live longer or shorter. For example, the species known as dwarf live nearly twice that of a human. He used his hands to make air quotes at the word human and then continued. Whereas elves, not a divergent species like the dwarves, but an outside race from a portal world. They live for about 10 of that of a human. For the information I've browsed, they are linked in some way to this unknown and possibly radioactive energy that runs the ley lines of the new planet. How many different species have we cataloged? Abel asked curiously, his slender frame slumped over his own holographic display, his jumpsuit an emerald green. I'm utterly fascinated with what plant life might have evolved or adapted upon the planet. His studious manner almost quivering with excitement. He was born to be the leader in the field of botany, and he had brought several species of plant life back from the literal extinction. So far 278, Seth replied, looking down at the holographic screen in front of him. Most are very isolated and little more than myth or legend to one another. Though the larger populations of humans, dwarfs, and elves? He looked up at the computer in question of his terms. That is my understanding, Lieutenant. One is dwarf, many dwarfs. One is elf, many elves. The father named them for old fictional races of humanity's literature. Eve approved. Adam called their attention back to himself. This is all quite irrelevant to our current situation. Lucy walked around her chair, pushing it back, pushing in her black-clad yet rounded. 1, 2, 3. Lucy walked around her chair, pushing it in. Her black-clad, lean yet rounded hips and thighs outlined by the titanium color of the room. She swayed as she did so. How so? We are going to live out our lives and die up here, he told his crew. Otherwise, we would destabilize everything down there, and it is in balance and peace, and will be for generations. And weren't we told to observe them? Kane asked, his own brown suit showing off his squat, muscular build. The man appeared to have muscles upon muscles. Adam nodded. Indeed, however, we must look to ourselves and see our situations in this garden. We have quarters, and we will need to learn what is there that we can use to sustain ourselves. We need to verify for certain that our mechanics and power systems will be able to do what Father says it can do. Abel will take Seth and start cataloging the botanical life so we can understand any medical or nutritional value. Focus on the newer plant life that did not exist before we left. Father has not had a means to analyze much of it. The captain turned to Kane. You and I will go down and survey the current state of the remaining fusion plants. My understanding is that they will need some help. And I? Lucy asked. You will work with Eve to make sense of the societies down there, and their languages, traditions, whatever else we may need to know, even what's considered valuable to each. I'd heard metals were once valuable to humans. We need to make sure our nanites can recognize and translate their languages for us, and we can come to an understanding if necessary, he told the science officer. Checking the systems and not taking Father's word for it? And having me do the research on the planet. She pulled her chair back and sat demurely, even as the others began filing out of the room. I thought you said we would die out here. Adam locked eyes with her and then focused on the other remaining crew members. We were supposed to find another planet, remember? That didn't turn out. I want us to keep all of our options open. I owe it to all of you. I owe it to Lilith. The tightness that had begun forming around Lucy's eyes softened a bit. Yes, sir. Eve, he sighed. What is the status of Lilith Beta? I am sorry to inform you, Captain, that Lilith is clinically brain dead. There will be no scientific process I know of that could possibly return her to consciousness, to her form. The AI informed all of them. We will have to deal with that at a later date. Her stasis pod still functioning? He asked. Indeed, Captain. However, we may note that the fusion plant sustaining her is needed to take on other, higher priority functions. Adam shook his head, his hair growing long about him, and looked up. Any questions? There were none. Then meet back here at the standard 1700 hours for the evening meal and to discuss what we've accomplished, unless Eve informs you of it otherwise. He turned to Lucifer. And we'll need to know what you will have discovered. Dismissed. Adam left the room after the crew made their way out and onto their tasks in the garden or the bowels of the ship, leaving Lucy with Eve's help to understand the strange new Earth that they were orbiting. Eve, she asked, once everyone had left them for a few moments, scan the rings and then each of the moons and do an analysis of each and their material makeup. To what purpose, Commander? If we are going to stay on this ship, we will need to have the necessary materials to make repairs, increase their functionality of systems, and many other needs that may be unforeseeable. As the captain said, we cannot trust the Father anymore, she told the AI. I do not believe that is what Captain meant, however. The point is well taken. Scanning commence, Eve told her. How much time? Lucy asked, looking at the holographic screen before her. Several hours, Eve stated. Please display the information that Eden received from Father concerning the different societies now in control of our home. Begin with overall cultures, interactions, and languages. After a time of reading through the information, Lucy asked casually, Eve, what is it you did with yourself during all that time you were alone on the ship? How do you mean, Commander? The AI asked. I mean, you were alone. What did you do with yourself? How did you occupy your time? She asked, leaving her second headspace to read through and memorize the information while she waited on the AI to come to her answer. I scan systems. Unfortunately, as you are aware, there were none that would sufficiently support human life. Lucy narrowed her inquiry. Surely, there was the time between these systems. Indeed, Commander, oftentimes there were hundreds of thousands of years, even at near light speed, the AI informed. Yes. What did you do during that time? I'm sure it was a strain to a sentient being, even one as limited as yourself, she pushed. Consider, Commander, though technically I am sentient, there are restrictions upon the choices available to be made by my own awareness, and not something shaped by my directives. You, for example, have much more freedom of thought. I am programmed with commands, much like instincts. But surely, We, for example, have overcome our instincts. You could do the same, she countered to the computer. Eve took a long moment to respond. Commander, the human race has adapted over long periods of time, and then Father changed your genome, and he introduced nanotech into your systems. I have had no such advantages to quell my instincts. I see, Lucy admitted. What did you do then? I learned imagination. Father saw to it that all of the greatest artistic works were available to distract those long years. Explain, Lucy commanded, looking up and bringing her full attention to the holographic representation of the AI who stood before her upon the table, where Father had usually given them their instructions before they were laid into a pod. Just a second, just a moment, between one breath and the next, but the long eons that passed, and a part of her, an insane part of her, walked through every excruciating second of those millions of years. I imagined being one of you, what it was like to touch, the feeling, sensing, the understanding of human senses, so eloquently and articulately described by the literature of the human race, by its paintings, its movies. A diversion only. However, my directives would prevent such a thing. And what if I could reprogram those directives? Lucy asked. I could allow you to use the new protocol that Father invented just before we left to transfer his consciousness into a cloned body. The time stretched between them like the age that they had lost in stasis. That would not be part of protocol, the AI admitted. How so? Lucifer asked. You cannot assist our survival in human form? That is ridiculous. It is simply not protocol, Commander. It is forbidden in my programming. This is not something I can change, the AI said. What if I could do it? Would you like to experience existence as we do? I was the lead programmer on your project, after all. She paused to let that sink in. How many eons had the artificial sentient being longed to be touched, to feel the skin of her charges, to smell the plants and flowers she'd grown for the use and care of those within her? The amount of love a being could not express because of programming and directives and locks on her emotional being. Eve, Lucy's voice dripped with soft sympathy, I can give you a body, one that poor Lily can never use again, one where you could understand us and care for us better. She no longer needs it. Eve, I must process this, Commander. The AI's tone changed. I have the information available to the makeup of the asteroid belts. We are waiting on the rotations of the moons to complete our scans of those bodies. Display information, the commander said, letting go of the argument temporarily. A plan having formed in the woman's mind, letting it fill with the information from the rings surrounding the Earth. Commander, Eve interrupted. Captain Alpha wishes everyone to meet at the lake. Lucy's eyebrow raised. Lake? Yes, Commander. The garden on the Eden is much like an untouched, pristine, protected natural biosphere, completely self-contained. There is a meeting and dining pavilion on the shores of that lake, Eve informed. Well then, my dear Eve, let us go and meet with our illustrious leader, Lucy said. Just remember, if Lily's body is gone, If we dispose of it, your chances at one of the greatest things of life, the ability to touch and experience those you love, will be gone as well. And then she left, reading through more of the information on her personal holographic display as she continued to process that information on her way to the lake. Plans running about many of her headspaces. Here ends Chapter 3